In this video, I will be talking about another original idea of mine. It's called Paradox of Dangerousness, and it's slightly more complicated than Paradox of Normal, which I covered previously, but I think you can manage this as well. There is context to this paradox, namely it's derived from another concept, which I call the crystal ball argument. So I will summarize what that argument is about. Don't bother putting that on Google, you will not find anything. It's really just something that I had given the title to this talking point I used to encounter a lot when I debated with this anti-pedophile on one image forum like many years ago. So this was one of the recurring arguments or talking points that he returned always, and it deals with the dangerousness of pedophiles, and this is how the argument goes really. It states that we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't really verify whether a given pedophile is safe. So therefore, we have grounds not to trust pedophiles. As far as these anti-pedo talking points go, this is one of the more reasonable ones. And I don't even pretend that I ever managed to debunk it really. There's no need to debunk something that you just recognize is a sound logic, right? But I did play around with that concept back then. And I realized something kind of interesting early on, is that you can kind of flip the argument and say something like, okay, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't verify that the pedophile is dangerous. Like, you can make the case both ways, that like you don't know either way. I think I've already lost some of the viewers. They've turned off the video. They think I'm completely nuts. I'm insinuating some pedophiles might not be dangerous. But let me try to explain what I mean by that. I'm going to use two ways to explain that. First of all, when we state something like, we can't verify whether X is safe, this is very different from stating that we know for sure that X can't be safe. So basically we are giving room for the possibility that they might be safe. And second of all, and above anything else, I think this is even more clear way to explain the illustrated point. Let's think about strange dogs here. Because the thing about the crystal ball argument is that, as well as paradox of dangerousness, is that it's applicable to all kinds of contexts and all kinds of entities. So let's think about strange dogs. So we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't really know for sure whether a strange dog is safe, right? And I do believe this is the reason why parents tell their kids that don't really go around petting strange dogs. Don't take the risk, all right? And it makes perfect sense to not take that risk because, they're strange dogs. They can attack you. You don't know really. But at the same time, when you think about all dogs, and let's bear in mind, all dogs are really strange dogs from someone's perspective, right? It just means that you don't know that dog. When you consider all of them, you have to concede that some dogs are just extremely sweet, extremely kind. They could even be protective toward people and children. So you know that some dogs for sure are completely safe to have around your child, and some of them happen to be strange dogs. So you don't know really either way whether the strange dog is dangerous or whether they are safe. That's the point I'm making here. Now, what's interesting about this, and we're approaching paradox of dangerousness. We get to that just very, very soon, because this is the final sort of a discovery I made when I thought about the crystal ball argument, is that when you make the point that, okay, we can't verify whether a given pedophile is safe, doesn't this really mean that we have a justification to regard that pedophile dangerous? I mean, isn't that what dangerousness really is? That we don't know whether something is safe, therefore it's dangerous. You can already probably see and guess where the paradox lies, is that we are having the crystal ball argument that makes us concede that we don't know whether a given pedophile or strange dog is safe, so therefore they're dangerous. Just like my nemesis in the image board made the point that now we have a justification not to trust pedophiles. However, this is the catch. You can already see from the strange dogs context that there are some strange dogs that are safe. So how can we make the point that, okay, we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know whether a strange dog is safe, therefore they are dangerous, but they might not be dangerous after all. They might be perfectly safe to have around your child. Now, whether you think some pedophiles are safe to have around your child, that's another matter. You don't really have to concede that point. the paradox still remains paradox. You can just think about it in terms of strange dogs if you want. That's really irrelevant. So we have this very interesting dilemma here. So what do we make of that? Well, luckily there is a solution to the paradox of dangerousness, and we will get to that next. All right, the solution to the paradox involves the use of two different senses to the word dangerousness. And I've already covered 3 different senses for dangerousness, in fact, in one of my previous videos. But in order to solve the paradox, we are just going to need 2 senses, namely potential dangerousness and effective dangerousness, which I'm going to summarize next what I mean by them. They're not really, I haven't made up these senses, it's just that I have given them titles and then I've tried to describe what type of dangerousness that is, but it's really, you should be able to, well, you can decide for yourself if this makes any sense, but I'm going to explain first what I mean by potential dangerousness. One of the key aspects here is that it's based on a lack of knowledge of variables. It's based on limited information, in other words. And in this sense, it's highly relative. So we have the observer, and then we have the object being perceived as dangerous. But when it's relative, the dangerousness isn't really embedded in the object. It's rather, it kind of lies somewhere between the observer and the object being perceived as dangerous. In the same way as when we think about the concept of uphill or downhill, it really depends on you as a passerby, like where you are in relation to the hill. Are you up the hill or are you down the hill? Whether it appears to you as downhill or uphill. Now, there are some examples of potential dangerousness that make this probably a bit more clear. For example, we could have a female rape victim who considers all strange males as potential rapists and just don't want to trust them. And I'm not really faulting her for that. It's just, it's neither right nor wrong to have that mindset. It's just the mindset that a person would have. In other words, the person just has this traumatic past experience and she doesn't want to take any risks anymore with males. She can't verify how good the male's impulse control is, how fiercely they are opposed to any sexual advances that are non-consensual, what kind of libido the man has, like how aggressive he is. Like all of these variables remain a mystery to her, so she decides she doesn't want to take a risk. And the same could be said about pedophiles. Like from a point of view of a parent, it does make sense that when they are considering whom to hire as a babysitter, and there's like one variable they know about a person, a male, let's say a male, pedophiles could be female, but whatever, it's not really relevant here. When the parent knows that some guy is a pedophile, it makes perfect sense for them to pick another babysitter. Not because the parent couldn't possibly know that there are responsible pedophiles out there, that there are non-offending pedophiles. It's rather that they couldn't verify which type of a pedophile the pedo is. So this is why it makes sense for them to not take the risk. And again, it deals with lack of knowledge of variables, right? They don't know how the pedophile would actually react around her child. But the thing about potential dangerousness is that you can apply it to inanimate objects as well. Like let's imagine a rickety looking bridge. There's a person who's considering to cross it, and it looks dangerous as hell. Like it's really looks like it's falling apart. So in this case, the bridge would be considered potentially dangerous by the person in the situation, because they can't really verify the structural integrity of the bridge. They just see the bridge and see that, okay, it might not have any integrity to speak of, but they can't verify it either way, because technically speaking, the bridge could be perfectly safe to cross. I mean, it could be perfectly sturdy and just in a good shape. It just looks completely, complete a mess, right? I mean, again, we're dealing with limited information, and it's important to realize here, because the next type of dangerousness is very different in that sense, because it's like almost the opposite kind of dangerousness. It has got nothing to do with limited information, but rather it's this sort of an absolute or objective sense of dangerousness, where when something is effectively dangerous, the thing we fear about the entity is going to actualize or would actualize. For a moment, let's imagine there were something like an omniscient God, something that wouldn't really be hindered by lack of knowledge of variables. For this entity, there wouldn't even be any need to talk about or consider the idea of potential dangerousness, because things would either be effectively dangerous for that entity or they would be effectively safe. For example, the omniscient God would know for sure which males are going to be guilty of a sex crime at some point in their lives. The omniscient God would know like whether the rickety looking bridge is going to collapse under this or that weight. We have to understand that, okay, this might seem a very, very theoretical concept. But the point is that I do believe, I'm pretty firm about this, that this is a real thing. This is a real type of dangerousness. And now up next, I will, before we really solve the goddamn paradox, I'm just going to explain, using a thought experiment, why I do believe these are real types of dangerousness and why there is a clear difference. So let's get to that. So imagine a person that has to pick one gun from two identical looking guns and then shoot himself with it. Now, the catch is that there's only one of the guns has a bullet in it, right? And the person in the experiment knows that only one gun has the bullets, but they don't, of course, know which gun has it. They just look identical, and therefore, from his point of view, both guns are just hugely potentially dangerous. I mean, he can calculate that there's 50% chance that he's going to kill himself when he pulls the trigger. But the thing that's interesting and important here is that, you have to understand, I'm pretty sure you do understand that the guns aren't the same. There's a fundamental difference between the two guns, and the difference is basically that one is effectively dangerous, the one with the bullet, because that's the only one that can kill the person. And if you want to analogize this even further, you can just think about the bullet with the gun as the pedophile that's going to molest a child in the future, the gun without the bullet as the pedophile who's not going to do any such thing, but that's optional, but I just wanted to throw that in. I think now we do have all the tools we need to resolve the paradox. Let's do that. I do believe we can clearly see now that the crystal ball argument merely implies that we can't know whether something is safe or dangerous in effective sense. And because we can't know whether something is effectively safe or effectively dangerous, whether something is like the gun without the bullet or whether it's like the gun with the bullet, we can't consider it potentially dangerous. And now there's no contradiction anymore. There's no paradox because it just completely melts away. As we consider the implications of the crystal ball argument, we're making statements about two different types of dangerousness. Something can be considered potentially dangerous, while we concede it is not necessarily effectively dangerous. I think this solution is sort of interesting from my point of view. I do hope you found some of this at least slightly interesting as well. But I think it's kind of a intriguing idea because it's pretty much almost forces us to consider dangerousness as not just this one thing, but rather different things. Why this is important is that just like with the word normal that I talked about in the previous video, the word dangerousness is almost as important in many kind of debates about social issues. I do believe that when you are appealing to someone's dangerousness, that's much better argument than appealing to someone's normality, just for the record. But still, this paradox just highlights that when you are making that kind of an appeal to dangerousness, there might be a reason why it's rational for someone to just ask you to define what type of dangerousness are you talking about. Because right off the bat, if you make some kind of a statement that pedophiles be bad because they are effectively dangerous, well, the premise is already false because not all pedophiles molest children. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but if you do, if you concede that point, you have to understand that then they can't all be considered effectively dangerous, and then we are left with two other senses of dangerousness, and then we have to think about what we can make out of those terms. Even if the premise then is true that, let's say, pedophiles are potentially dangerous or they are statistically dangerous, which is a third type of dangerousness, then we have to really seriously think about what we can even justify if that is true. I don't think we can justify all the things Some people would like those premises to justify as a conclusion. So that gets to different problems, and certainly that's a debate for some other future time. But the takeaway here is that dangerousness is kind of a dangerous concept. It's vague, just like the concept of normality. But if you do insist on using the term, because if you are an anti-pedo, this is kind of a secret information for you guys. But if you want to, like, the best argument you can ever hope to make against pedophiles, it deals with dangerousness. But you have to understand that you can't justify everything you want to probably justify, even if they were dangerous. And if they are dangerous and you want to make that case, please define what type of dangerousness are you talking about, and then the conversation and debate can really continue. That's all I have. Thanks for listening.